Okay, hello everyone. Let's go ahead and take a look at using trig models. Now, let's go ahead and say that you're given a particular trig equation which models a particular situation. What kind of questions can be asked? And how would you go about solving or answering those questions? So let's just take a look at an example. Say, for example, your trig model was t of x is equal to 3 cosine of 4x plus 1 minus 5. Now, what are some of the questions that can actually be asked about that particular model? Well, here's some of the things in very general form. Like, say, for example, if you want to know if you're given a particular independent variable value, can you find out what the dependent value would be? So, in other words, if you were given a particular value of x, could you find out the particular value of t that's associated with that value of x? And sure you could. Like, say, for example, if x is equal to 0, how can you find out what t of 0 is? And that's basically very straightforward. Now, let's say, for example, being that we know that this is cosine and it is going to have maximum and minimum values, how do you actually find out the maximum and minimum values of t of x? Well, the one thing that we want to go ahead and consider is we want to go ahead and make sure that we all realize that the maximum cosine value is always going to be 1. So if that's the case, if we wanted to go ahead and find out where the maximum value of this is, well, this cosine of 4x plus 1, regardless of whatever the values of x are going to be, the maximum value that this can actually be is 1. Therefore, the maximum value will be negative 2. Now, it's the same thing with the minimum cosine value. So if the minimum cosine value is negative 1, then this would be 3 times by negative 1, because that's the minimum value of cosine. That's going to be negative 8. So therefore, we know that the maximum for this particular model is going to be negative 2, and the minimum would be negative 8. So let's say, for example, another question that could be asked is, if you're given a particular dependent value, could you find out the independent value that is associated with that dependent value? Okay, now that we found out that this was actually going to have a maximum value of negative 2, let's say, for example, that t was going to be equal to t of x is equal to negative 3, could you find out what the value of x is? And sure, that's exactly what we did in terms of actually finding the values or solving for a particular trig equation. Now, you can also go ahead and take a look at inequalities. Now, I'm going to have to change this a little bit. Let's say, for example, we wanted to find out where t of x is actually going to be less than 5, or negative 5. So we can actually go ahead and solve for these types of inequalities as well, because we know what the initial statement is. Once we know the initial statement, we can go ahead and solve for this algebraically. Now, the period, of course, the period is always going to be the same. The period is going to be 2 pi over b, because we're dealing with the cosine in this case. And we can also go ahead and determine what that is. And then the other parts, well, any other questions that you can think of, we'll go ahead and see if we can tackle in class. So there you go. Those are based upon the particular trig function that's given, which models a particular context. We can go ahead and answer all of these types of questions and possibly more. And being that you know how to solve for equations, you should be able to answer all of them. Okay, so we'll take a look at some of those more specific questions in class, and we'll see how we do. All right, okay, let's take a look at those in class later. Bye-bye.